So the Grandview Hotel was in the planning stages when Monrovia first went on the market. There is a map from 1886 showing the Monrovia tract and the town of Monrovia, the town site. And one particular block has the eastern, almost all the black on the east, identified with a hotel. Now it's just a generic hotel building. It's not the one that was constructed, but it is obviously a hotel. So you can tell from that yes, they planned to have a tourist hotel there from the beginning. Samuel Kiefer, Colonel Kiefer, built it. It opened in, I think, late 1886. It was at the northwest corner of Ivy and Lemon Avenues, where Monrovia City Hall is today. 2 stories, mostly 2 stories. Some was a little, about story and a half, but it did have a corner cupola that was 3 stories in height. There was a broad front porch around 2 sides of it. The interior had parlors, a dining room, various guest rooms, kitchen wing. It also had a clubhouse, which was on the same premises to the west on Lemon. And there is a great picture from 1887 showing the interior of the clubhouse. You can see, I believe, 2 pool tables. In the foreground, you can see a circular table. And sitting on the table itself are bottles of what obviously is alcohol or distillates. Is that what they use, the term they use, distillates? Anyway, my comment is, if that's the real thing, this was taken prior to December of 1887, because it would not have appeared there after the incorporation of the town in December of 1887. The clubhouse itself later became the residence of Eliza Kiefer, the wife of Colonel Kiefer, and then at some point was moved west on Lemon Avenue, and for many years was at 147, the corner of Lemon and Primrose. It was divided into apartments, and then the property was acquired by what was then General Telephone. And about 1968 or 69, they tore the building down, and put a subsidiary station there in its place. It was on the corner for a long time. The hotel was open and closed depending on how finances were and who the owner was. At one point, the owners petitioned the city council after incorporation, and of course serving alcohol was prohibited. They would occasionally petition the city council to grant them a special dispensation so they could serve alcohol. They said, many of our guests are out-of-town people accustomed to having alcohol with their meals. We would like to be able to accommodate them. And usually the answer was no. We are dry and we're staying that way. Thank you very much. Later on, I think they might have relaxed it slightly, but the hotel closed with some permanency in 1950. Now, when my house was moved to the corner of Lemon and Ivy in 1900, I know that the hotel was closed because my grandmother told me that she had what you'd now call a slumber party. It was an overnight party for some of her friends from school. Now, the house itself was not large enough to accommodate all the friends, so her mother rented space in the Grandview Hotel so the girls could stay there overnight. And my grandmother said they amused themselves by running up and down the hallways until there was a resident caretaker who gave them hell for running in the hallways, and they stopped. At some point, the name changed to, instead of Grandview, it became La Vista Grande Hotel, when Hispanicization was like, we went from JIC to Alta Vista and a few other street names like that. So yes, they Hispanicized the name of the hotel. It went from Grandview to La Vista Grande. And it was average. I'm thinking that might have been about early 1900s. At the time, I think the last effort was to make it a hotel in connection with the automobile country club, something like that, maybe where you would go on an automobile excursion and and stop at certain locations through Southern California. Anyway, I don't think it was in use when it caught fire in May of 1916 and burned to the ground. So it had a somewhat checkered career, just as finances ebbed and flowed in Monrovia based on the collapse of the land boom, recovery in the early 1900s, etc. Colonel Kiefer left the property, I believe, to his wife and perhaps to his son. It was operated by various individuals who maybe didn't own it, but took a lease on operating it. I think some of the Monroes operated at one point. A.E. Cronenweth bought the property at one point and operated it. Also, probably owned it at the time it was, the hotel itself burned down. I think he continued to own the property until it was acquired by the city to become the Monrovia City Civic Center. In Myron's collection is the hotel register, and I'm assuming that it may have come from other items, other archives that he got from the family of Claire Cronenweth, who was A.E. Cronenweth's daughter.
And is that when Mr. Cronenweth built the hunting lodge?
Yeah, it was built in connection. I think the idea was that you could go up in the foothills and stay in the hunting lodge and then go hunting in the foothills.
And it was now what we call Gold Hill, so it wasn't that far away.
No, it wasn't that time. That time, I think they called it Diamond Flats. I knew the Smith family that lived there in the 1950s, and part of the original building was still there with additions. It was completely demolished and a modern house built in that same location. But part of the original hunting lodge was still there. Well, we have the letter from Harold Frollo talking about the burning of the hotel in 1916 and how his family stood and watched it until it became too hot to stand there. So Lizzie Anderson invited them to come back to the Anderson house, where she served them probably lemonade and cookies, and they watched it from inside where the heat was not so substantial. And his comment that I found particularly interesting was the heat of the fire was so great that it heated the bricks and they were glowing red hot.
And as a result of that, a new fire engine was...
That's what prompted the purchase of the Seagrave in 1917. The fact that the fire department was hopelessly overwhelmed.